From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. Welcome to a brand new podcast. I'm your host, James Hernishan. We begin Folklore with a three-part exploration of education. Today's episode, The Teacher. Polk County is a diverse community. Not nearly as ethnically diverse as a major metropolitan center like New York or Chicago, but when it comes to opinions, it's not hard to find representative samples from across the political spectrum. Nowhere is this more in evidence than at a Polk County school board meeting. So it seemed like a good idea to kick off this podcast by exploring the state of our county schools, which are still ranked among the top performers in North Carolina. What I needed was someone intimately familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of our schools, but with the freedom to talk about what's working and what's not, without fear of retribution. Leslie Rhinehart was a public school science teacher for almost 20 years, about half of that time with Polk Schools. She's a master's in chemistry from UNC Charlotte. In 2017, she was a finalist for the Presidential Award for Mathematics and Science Teachers, and she's also been a finalist for a Burroughs Wellcome Foundation Math and Science Teacher Award. Both of these are pretty big deals for science teachers. In 2019, she was Polk County's Teacher of the Year. But then she accepted a position at Blue Ridge Community College, where she now teaches chemistry. She graciously agreed to be the first guest in Folklore to talk about why she joined Polk Schools and why she left. We discuss why a rural county like Polk enjoys a school system with such a good reputation, what's changed over the past few years, the impact of COVID-19, the double-edged sword of Common Core, and why we should be paying more attention to what's happening in Raleigh when it comes to the future of education here. If you have any experience with Polk Schools, as a parent or a teacher or a student, you'll probably find yourself nodding in agreement at several points in our talk, which was recorded earlier this spring at Blue Ridge Community College. So, Leslie, or Ms. Rhinehart.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you came to be where you are now, beginning with what you're doing just prior to joining Polk County Schools.
Okay, so my path to teaching is not a typical, I'm considered a lateral entry teacher. So I didn't start out wanting to be a teacher. I originally worked in industry, found myself in graduate school working on my thesis when a need came up in a local two-year college that needed a teacher instructor immediately because another teacher went out on emergency maternity leave. So I ended up taking her position, actually fell in love with teaching there. I stayed out though with my children because I at that time had gotten pregnant and wanted to stay home with my children. At the end of when my children turned about 5, I decided to go into teaching, and I looked around to decide what I wanted to do. And Polk County, I was living in Polk County, but Polk County didn't have any openings. A local county next door, Rutherford County, had an opening, and I ended up going there. Stayed there for 10 years, decided that I wanted to quit commuting an hour into an hour and a half a day, and Polk County had an opening, so I moved just across the county, still teaching what I taught, AP Chemistry, Honors Chemistry, and they offered me opportunity to teach a couple of what they call innovative classes like astronomy or engineering. So I just moved from one public school system countywide over to the next.
But you originally have you a degree in chemistry, right?
Yeah, I have a master's in chemistry. So I didn't really ever intend on teaching. I actually worked a few years as a nuclear chemist before settling down in this area. My husband couldn't get a job in the area where we were. He was originally in the newspapers, and when we moved to Knoxville, one of Knoxville's biggest newspapers closed, so it kind of inundated the area with unemployed journalists, and he tried for a long time to try to get a job in the area. It just wasn't happening, so I agreed to move off. And so then that's kind of how we ended up where we are right now.
So when did you join Polk County Schools?
I joined Polk County Schools in, it's 2022, so it was 8 years ago, so 2014.
Okay. I mean, at that point, Polk County Schools was relatively well regarded in the state.
Yes.
And I remember being amazed at how Saluda School was one of the top
Oh, yes.
elementary schools, and the Polk County schools in general. Even today, it's still rated relatively highly. I don't think it really is number 2 in the state all the time, but it's certainly in the top 5 or 10 consistently.
As a public school for its size, it is still rated very high within the state.
And which is particularly surprising given we're a rural county.
And we're a rural county that really has only one high school, with the fact that our median income is actually very skewed for what we have there, right? We have a very high retiree community that skews our median income. So it looks from the state like we have more of a very high middle class section of students, when in reality, that's not what we have.
So we actually have a fair bit of money available per pupil.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, do you think is that in part why Polk County Schools has been relatively successful?
It is, in that our county commissioners have been very giving to our school. Now, when you talk about the money available to our students, when the state looks at the money we have available, that actually means we get less from the state. So the county has to pick up and add to that. And our county commissioners in Polk County have always been very giving, which allow us to keep their teacher to student ratio as small as it has. If it wasn't for the county commissioners and the fact that pretty much everybody in the county wants to keep that ratio low, our county would have to go up very high in our teacher to student ratios, much more what you would see in our outer extremities in our states, in our very western states, in our very eastern part of the state, where the ratio is more, you see 32 to 40 plus in a classroom. And we're very fortunate that we're keeping in the 20s and below.
Now, I think everybody in Polk County, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that everybody in Polk County has a certain degree of pride
They do.
in that. And in fact, it's one of the things that I think everyone can agree on, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum or what socioeconomic class you're in. People are relatively proud of Polk County Schools.
It is a very unifying concept with the schools, yes.
Now, in the past, I would hope that that kind of pride would be reflected in the way in which parents deal with the schools and deal with the teachers.
It has been. I can tell you that my children went all the way through the school system. They started in Trine Elementary, in kindergarten, and went all the way through Polk High School, 12th grade. So they went their entire school years, K through 12, in Polk County school system. And prior to our current very polarized political system that we're just now all having to live in, the school systems really brought everybody together. You saw that when they would do fundraising, whether it was for book reading night or for teacher appreciation, or for in the middle school when they had to raise money for band instruments or whatever it was that they were doing. The parents always really unified themselves and got together. Whether it was for sporting events, if they needed to raise money for a cross-country event or something, they were very unified in what they did.
What about the role of teachers in toward creating a reputation that the Polk County Schools has? I would think that it's one thing to have a low student-teacher ratio and a fair bit of money available, but you've got to have good teachers. Obviously, we've had some very good teachers, and you have won lots of awards. So you have been among one of the more appreciated teachers, I think, certainly as science teachers, and since I've been around Polk County. But the decision to work for Polk County Schools, is that in part because of its reputation? It
was because of its reputation and allowing teachers to be more autonomized in their classroom, having more of a say-so without being micromanaged. Coming from the previous county before I moved over to Polk County, you were very micromanaged. Your time as far as work days were concerned were very micromanaged. You had very set professional development. In fact, all of your work days were professional development. My last 6 years in the counties previous, we didn't have a day in the classroom. And Polk County has really always protected their teachers to allow them to be in the classroom, to get stuff ready, because that's actually a very important role for a teacher, to be able to use those teacher work days to, especially me as a science teacher, I needed to be able to get chemicals straightened up to get ready for the next semester, because I have to prep chemicals, get kits ready, decide if I liked that lab or not, and prepare for another lab. And they've always allowed us to do that. And when we have had professional development, it has always been focused on what we felt like we needed. They've always sent out questionnaires to decide, what kind of professional development did you want? And they've always been very supportive, along with the Polk County Community Foundation, to push teachers to go to conferences to get more advanced professional development that they might want or might need. And that's really can help make effective teachers. We've had many teachers go into all the AP development, right? The advanced placement development for teachers to become more effective advanced placement teachers, so that students can take the advantage of those advanced placement programs and courses to get college credit. And it's not just about getting college credit. When you take an advanced placement course, you are learning how to study in a high school bubble that is more forgiving than a college environment, so that when you do go to that bigger campus or that more advanced program, you have gotten yourself ready to withstand the rigor that you're going to see, to be able to handle the hours of studying you're going to have to do, and just to prepare for that sheer amount of information you're going to have to deal with. And those institutes that they would call them to send you to at the Polk County Community Foundation would support our teachers in going to those.
Well, Polk County Community Foundation certainly is an integral part of the social infrastructure of,
Yes.
of Polk County, and it has worked very closely with Polk Schools for a very long time. So you've painted this really kind of rosy picture of, and certainly it is consistent with my impressions.
Yes.
As when I moved here, I wasn't even planning to have kids until I realized how good the school system would be. And so Polk County school system has become a big part of my life because of that. But you're not there anymore.
Yes.
And I don't want to make this too difficult, but can you explain why you decided to move over to Blue Ridge Community College?
Well, part of it was some personal things had happened. I'd experienced a great loss with my father passing, and that had caused some other issues within myself. But it was just also, I could just see down the road that overall public education is just not changing. I'm still struggling with staying in public education. The way public education is moving forward in North Carolina, I really don't think it is for the benefit of the student. Even though Polk County's mantra is doing what's right for students, they do their best to do what's right for students, and they take what the state gives them, and they take the mandates from the state, and they do the best they can for the student. But the problem with our educational system is not Polk County, it's not Wake County, it's not any one county. It's really the mandates that are coming down from the state, the overbearing testing that goes on, the focus on the scores, when the things that go on with the scores are social issues that a teacher really can't resolve, right? When we have students that are coming in with issues from home that we have no control over, yet, food issues, drug issues, just overall abuse issues. And these are things that as teachers, especially lead teachers, we have advocated for our legislatures to. That was one of the reasons we wanted Medicaid increased, right, was to help us in the school system where, us as a teacher, my job is to teach chemistry, but now I'm teaching chemistry and I'm being a counselor and I'm looking for signs of abuse, and we're running, active shooter drills, and we're dealing with that emotional aspect. And now we're dealing with the polarization that we deal with, along with all that has come out with that. And those issues are just not really things that a school system is equipped to deal with. And I just don't know the answer to where we're going with it.
Well, I don't know if anybody knows the answer, but certainly we are asking schools to do a lot more than teach. And there's very few teachers who are prepared to take on those responsibilities.
And that's it. In our preparation to be a teacher, in our trainings, we're not trained to do that. We're trained to recognize dyslexia.
Sure.
Right? We're recognized to train to recognize some learning disorders, but we're not recognized to deal with trauma. I mean, we can on our own. Like I've gone to tons of trainings on ACEs to learn what traumas children experience and how they deal with it and how it manifests in the classroom to better help my students. But those are things I do on my own, right, to help my students. So that's my own time, my own pay sometimes. Sometimes those trainings aren't free. But we ask our legislatures to help us with that, yet the funding that's coming from the legislature is getting less and less. They propose it as more and more. They are paying more, but when you think about the cost, I mean, how much has stuff risen, for keeping buildings up, right now, probably the biggest struggle a school system handling right now is they don't have the fuel budget for buses till the end of the year. There's no way. They're probably running out right now. Nobody's talking about that. Where's the money going to come from for the fuel? And we don't discuss those things. We just act like, well, we gave them monies. What have they spent it on? Well, they've spent it on the things that prices rise on, just like they do for any family.
Do you think that the average parent in Polk County or any other county in North Carolina really understands any of this shift, any of this new pressure on schools and teachers?
I don't think they do. I think they try. I think they try, but then we're bombarded daily, any person is, by all the different news feeds that we get. So they get the legislators telling them one thing, they get the school system who's still trying to tell them that their babies are safe there and it's a good school system, and it is. Public schools, to me, are still some of the best schools in the state. They have to be. We produce students who go to MIT, who go to Brown, who go to Duke. You cannot be a failing school system if you're producing students to go to those schools. Yet our legislature wants you to believe that they are, and they need to all be charter schools. That's just not true.
Well, it's not even just charter schools. Our congressman, Madison Cawthorn, just the other day said he wants to quadruple the number of kids doing homeschooling because he was homeschooled, and he's very, very skeptical about public schools in general. And obviously, there's a fair bit of sympathy for that point of view. We've just gone through several months or a couple of years, really, of really wrenching relationships between the community and the schools thanks to COVID. And it seems like there's a lot of pent-up frustration among families. Maybe COVID was a big reason because obviously you didn't want to have to try to homeschool your kids.
Right.
Because you had no choice. But a whole series of other social issues have been thrown at the school board and thrown directly at teachers. We talk about attempts to ban books or change the way social studies curriculum is handled with, so-called critical race theory, which of course is a graduate level issue, not a high school issue. But what struck me, because I attended some of these board meetings, was that the parents didn't seem to understand what it was that teachers were tasked with doing.
Yes. So, when we're talking about wanting the curriculum to be open, the curriculum has always been open. Teachers in all levels are very scripted with what they can teach. We have a standard course of study, whether you want to call it Common Core or any other set of whatever they want to wrap it up in a bow and feed it to you. It's still a set course of study by our North Carolina DPI, and it has been online for years. We go get it offline. Any public person can go get it offline if they want to know what we're teaching in the order that we're teaching, and pretty much the materials with which we're teaching, it's all online. The only thing that teachers probably struggle with now, especially in public education, is because the money for books is really, really, really small. So there is no set textbook anymore. Again, Polk County has been very privileged in that they'll find money for textbooks. Otherwise, The textbook that I used was 18 years old. Now, chemistry hasn't really changed a lot in 200 years, so it's okay, but the books were falling apart, right? So I would use a lot of internet, right, to help supplement what the kids would do. And of course, as we moved into COVID, I had to use a lot of internet to push out. Here are some good National Science Foundation videos for you to look at, So I always vetted the videos. I didn't just put out, or I made my own videos once we got some more technology to make our own videos to push it out. But public schools have to use what's out there and what's available and what's free, because we just don't have the money. Like, for instance, here where I am now, they're wanting to push more online classes. Well, I teach chemistry. I need you to be in there doing lab. Well, to have an online class, you've got to have an online lab. It's a virtual lab. Those programs are expensive. They cost about $20,000 a year. So there's no way one public high school could afford that. So we're just looking at different things here.
What do we need to do? Obviously, if the changes are being driven by the state legislature, that's a political question. It's who do you elect office and what kind of decisions do these people make? Is there a way for parents and families in a county like Polk, which doesn't have a very robust media system, really have a lot of effort to educate the people because newspapers, business models don't work anymore.
Right.
And the television stations don't pay attention to us because we're too small.
Right.
And that's in part what this podcast is about, is an attempt to talk about these things in a way that people might relate to. So do you have any suggestions on what you'd like families to be thinking about when they are frustrated with school?
So when you're frustrated with your child's school, we have to think about who all we're educating. We're not educating one child, we're educating the entire community, right? So in that entire community comes a melting pot of ideas, of religious backgrounds, of family backgrounds, of ethnicities. Even Polk County, as small as it is, it has a more varied ethnicity than we want to think. It's still there. We are predominantly white, right? But more than you would see in Charlotte. Charlotte would have more of the melting pot, but we still do have that at the high school, and we need to consider that, right? So when we're educating for the public, we can't be educating for one narrow idea, right? So we want to educate for the whole part, but we're not trying to, I guess this is going to be wrong for me to say, we're not trying to indoctrinate, because I think if teachers were really good at indoctrinating, everybody would be learning really, really, really well, because then I would have mastered my ability to teach. If I could really indoctrinate really well, then I would be able to indoctrinate my subject into them, right? I would be able to get them to learn chemistry really well, because that's all they would want to learn. We struggle getting students to learn, to mainly get them to give up their cell phone is our biggest struggle. So, when we're in the classroom, we're not trying to turn students against parents. We're trying to teach the subject that we've been tasked to teach with. So when parents are coming to the classroom frustrated that their child may not have the grade they want, or it may keep them from getting into college that they want to be in, or that one child in that classroom said something to them that hurt their feelings and the teacher didn't see that, well, that's because the teacher has 18 kids in front of them. They're trying to make sure they're all on task. They're not on their phones. They're trying to learn chemistry. I'm also maybe having to teach, in this day and age, 3 kids that are at home. So I'm trying to pay attention to my computer screen, pay attention to the kids that are out in front of me. And at the same time, there's probably been 4 announcements come over the intercom system that has broken my train of thought. And that's just in 90 minutes. And you have to repeat that several times a day. We're not really trying to upset you. We're just trying to teach what we've been tasked to teach from the state. So maybe if we don't get so upset and we just take a step back and look that they're just trying to teach chemistry, it might not be as earth-shattering as they think.
Well, it's interesting because the challenges you just described for a teacher are not the sort of things I hear parents complaining about. In fact, they don't seem to be responding to the actual on the ground situation in the schools and to what their children are coming home with. They seem to be responding to national pressures.
Yes.
And in part, I think, again, might be due to the fact we don't have local media anymore. So the only media people are consuming are, cable news shows. And so they're hearing these stories about what's going on in schools, which don't seem to match up with, you aren't struggling with teaching the right books or dealing with racial issues. You're just struggling with the ordinary logistics of trying to teach a classroom.
Exactly. So when I've attended some of these school board meetings too, and I get frustrated with the fact that when I'm listening to some of our parents speak, I'm a bit annoyed that I'm feeling like their news source is Facebook, not even a legitimate news source. So they're getting the sensationalized news ideas that are out there. Well, they're not even really news. They're stories that aren't even real. And if you went past the first thing that popped up, you would see that they've been all debunked. They're not real stories. So you're worried about something that's not really happening in your school system. Your school system is still really sound and really good and still doing a really good job educating your child, making them a well-rounded person, making them able to think. We all hear about how students need to learn critical thinking skills. And they do. They need to learn it to be able to do a job, but they also need to be able to do it to be able to differentiate. Now that we're bombarded on a daily basis by stories that it's very difficult to know, is this story real? Is this story not real? And how far do I have to go down to dig to find out if it is real? I mean, I don't have that much time in the day for every story I look at to go down 12 pages to finally decide if this one's real or not. And that's a very difficult thing for us as a society. How are we going to deal with that?
Do you have any suggestions on how the schools as an institution can respond to this disconnect between what they're actually doing and what so many people in the community suspect they're doing?
Well, I mean, not at the last board meeting, but the one prior to that, Aaron Green even made a statement about how we're not teaching critical race theory because it's not a thing that's taught. Critical race theory, people have misconstrued as to what it is. Critical race theory is a graduate level law school concept. It's where you're looking at what are the laws and how have they been shaped. That's not what people now think critical race theory is. They've misconstrued it as it is going to make my little baby cry when he comes home. That's not still what it is. Nobody's teaching critical race theory because it's not something that's taught. It's not part of anybody's standard course of study. Yet all these news channels and all these stories want to tell people that it is being taught, and it's a problem that we need to concern ourselves with. Madison Cawthorn's one of the ones who keep telling people that critical race theory, we need to worry about it. We don't need to worry about critical race theory. It's not something that's being taught in any school except a law school somewhere. So if your child is in law school, congratulations. They're doing great. That is, if they're in a K through 12 school, critical race theory isn't even being addressed. They're just trying to teach their standard course of study with what the history books have laid out. Now, our history going to change? Your book's going to change? I hope so. I hope we include some of the things that we may have, sugar coated a little over. And now that we're opening up and we're being a little bit more open-minded about what we've done to our indigenous population, and we want to look at that at a little more truthful lens, why should we not look at it at a little more truthful lens?
But we're not even ready to do that. No. Because we're underfunding just the basics at this point.
We don't even have the books for that.
Right.
Yeah. So it's still the same thing that you learned 20 years ago. It's still there. Yeah. Now, you'll say, that's not the math that I learned. Well, it actually is. They just do it in a little different order and draw a little box where you did the FOIL method.
Yeah, I mean, when my son came home with the new way to multiply double digits and stuff, I thought, well, that's not how I learned it. But then I went through it and said, well, it is really the same thing. It's just different wrapping
Yes.
in a way. But I do understand how a parent would say, hey, wait a second. Why is my son or my daughter learning something different than what I learned when it's just math, which should be universal and eternal, right? And do you think that some of those evolutions in pedagogy and how we learn to teach, is that upsetting some parents, making them feel less certain, less sure about their schools?
Oh, sure. I'm sure that that is. I mean, I'm sure that when you look back and you're like, oh, I can't even help my student. My student's struggling. I can't help them because the way I help them, they get it counted wrong on their paper. I do think that we do need to have some common sense where that's concerned. As a teacher, right? If I have a student who's struggling and their parent is teaching them and they can show me their work and they can get the answer, then I'm good with that. Now as far as again our testing that we do over and over again, they have to show it a certain way for all of these standardized testing. That's where we're getting mad at the teachers because they're like, well, what's the difference if they just get the answer? Well, it's not that they're mad at you and they have to do it this way. It's that the standardized testing is telling them that they have to do it this way or it's counted wrong. So now your child is going to perform very low on the test. So they may or may not advance to the next grade because of that. It's going to reflect poorly on the school. It's going to reflect poorly on the teacher that teacher couldn't teach that concept. And it's not that the teacher couldn't teach the concept. The teacher may have learned it the way you learned it. It's just that now they want it taught this way. Now that's where I think Common Core came down poorly, in that when it was thought up here and said, we need to have multiple ways to get all of our different learners. We now know that people learn in different ways. We have visual learners, we have kinesthetic learners, we have auditory learners, we have people that just learn in such different ways. And where before a teacher 25 years ago, they taught one way, and if you learned that way, you were golden. If you didn't learn that way, you just struggled your whole life. Now, as a teacher, when we're taught how to teach, we're taught that, well, you've got to differentiate, right? You may have these 5 different kinds of learners in your classroom. So your lesson needs to be able to address your 5 different kinds of learners. So instead of coming up with a lesson really on a daily basis for every subject a teacher teaches, they have to come up with 5 different lessons to address each learner. So your teachers are already exasperated. They're doing their best to address all of these. And when they're doing this and the state really says, well, you got to focus on these 3 especially, then they've got the heat from the state, they've got the heat from the performance on the testing, and now their parents are like, but I only know these 2 ways, and I'm trying to help my child. And I feel the frustration of the parents. But then there's the frustration of the admin coming down because test scores have got to be where they've got to be. And then you've got the frustration of the teacher who feels like they're not pleasing anybody. And they really only care about the child. Your teachers care so much about your children. They really, really do.
I sometimes feel that parents don't understand just how much these teachers do care and how hard they work. I mean, some of them might, there's always a few bad apples in the bunch.
There are. There are.
But generally speaking, I've been very impressed with how hard the teachers work. And it seems like we need to educate the community about what's really going on in the schools because, as you point out, there's been some changes in the way we teach. And maybe the parents haven't really been apprised of that, of the reasons for the changes and the fact that some are really just tweaks on old-fashioned ways of doing things. And so parents are scared of what they don't understand.
Yes.
So what we need to do as a community, as a county, and as a state, as a country as a whole, is figure out a way to keep families in the loop, I guess.
But I don't know that we need to, I think families are in the loop, okay, because I don't want it to get skewed into, I think there's legislature on the table right now that teachers have to put in a year's worth of lesson plans in advance. That's very daunting, not because we're scared about what we teach, but that we have so many interruptions. I even stopped keeping my lesson plans because I just had to erase so much. My lesson plan book, I would literally erase holes in it because I would have so many interruptions or so many changes. We'd have an assembly, or that lesson didn't go well, so I had to move it down here, or I had too many people absent that day, and then COVID come along, and that just threw a wrench in everything. And we're all still trying to recover from COVID. And I think that's where we keep talking about giving grace to the students and the issues they're having. I think we need to give grace to our educational system and give them just a little bit of time to figure out where we go from here. You know, how are we going to continue to educate where we are with the new possibilities of being able to teach online? Like, I really enjoy taping my lectures for my students because now my students can go back anytime and review what I've done, right? So if you're having a difficult time with, I don't know, nomenclature, you can go back and review what I did in nomenclature. It's right there for you to see all the time. I do enjoy that they can go back and do that. Now, I don't enjoy that, you know, admin can go back and scrutinize it. So it's still, again, a two-edged sword for a teacher. We want it to help our students, but I don't want it to be used against me. So, you know, you do have that out there where, you know, I want to help them, but I don't want to be scrutinized for it.
So where does that leave us? After 2 years of COVID, it seems like we really do need to stop and think. As you point out, there are lessons to be learned from the last couple of years on what can work, new ideas, new ways of dealing with individual needs. But there's this huge political polarization and misinformation out there. It's almost like we need a break.
It really is. It's almost like we all need a good summer vacation from it all. I don't know. I just know the current push is to keep going in the direction we're going with the privatization of public schools, which saddens me because I think we're going to see more and more money funneled out of our public school system, which is only going to cause these issues that we've talked about today to grow and grow and cause problems with how do we feed our children? How do we bus our children there? How do we keep up these great programs that we have in our school system? Polk County is one of the few school systems I've seen that has allowed so much autonomy to their teachers and allowed them to be creative. You know, like, hey, could you come up with a good engineering class? It's like, yeah, I can. You know, and then you go out and you write a big grant and you bring robots into your classroom, and here's a program that only school systems around Raleigh see, but you've brought to your high school. So that is something that Polk County has allowed. Is that still going to be allowed if the money starts shrinking and shrinking and we're only allowed to teach core classes?
So we really just need to get the word out somehow that the system in Polk County isn't broken.
It's not broken.
There are systemic problems at the state level.
Yes.
Funding problems. Perhaps the way Common Core was pushed a little bit too much in one direction, maybe. But people in Polk County should still be very proud of their schools.
They should be very proud of their school system. Their school system is still an incredibly good school system. I mean, my own children went through it. They've done really well. My son just graduated with a degree in physics. My daughter is getting her doctorate in pharmacology. Their friends are graduating and going in same directions, getting doctorates in chemistry. You know, the amount of kids doing phenomenal things out of Polk County, such a small school and such a small school system. I don't think most of the public realizes that.
All right. So we'll close with just one question about your advice to an average parent who doesn't have, you know, we don't have, again, good local media coverage of what goes on in the schools. And people are too busy to, you know, try to find out this information.
Right,
they all
right.
can't host a podcast.
Right.
So What would you suggest they do to try to stay more aware and abreast of the state of the schools that we really have right now?
As far as Polk County is concerned, if you step back 4 years ago, the county had a tremendous amount of trust in the school system. You didn't have parents that were that worried because they knew their kids were being educated. I don't know what changed. Why can't you trust the school system? They're still doing the same job. They're still educating your kids to the best of their ability. As far as your teachers are concerned, I think trust is a big issue that you need to not forget. You were able to trust before. Why can't you still trust them now to educate your child? As far as funding and where that's going and where that's headed in the state, that is going to affect your county. Polk's been able to stay in a bubble for a very long time where other counties haven't been able to. That is where you do need to watch what your legislatures do as far as funding is concerned and make sure that your public schools get funded and that you look a little closer to what your legislatures are saying is funding, right? Yeah, they're spending more. They truly are spending more, but things are costing more. I'm spending a whole lot more, but I'm not getting as much for my money, right? It takes me a whole lot more money to fill up my truck now, and that's my entire budget for the month, right? So now that's the same thing schools are facing. So yeah, they're getting more money, but it's not going nearly as far as it used to go. So understand that the money still needs to come in, or you're going to see more and more happen to your school systems that you don't want to see.
So trust the teachers and pay attention to the politics.
Yeah. I think that's the big things we need to do.
All right. Thanks so very much.
No problem.
Thank
you for having me.
Maybe we can touch base again in a year or so and see how things are going.
Yeah.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again. That's it for this week's episode. Next time, the student's point of view. I'll be talking with a remarkable young man with a unique story. You can always get a hold of me at jamesH@polklore.com with your feedback, suggestions for guests, or topics we should be discussing. Thanks for listening.